Hi, I'm Oge Obasi, and I'm here to talk about Mami Wata with Nollywood. It's because that we have a broken history that I'm making films like Mami Wata, or I'm trying to make films like Mami Wata. We don't have a heritage of our stories that you can go to and reference, even though it does exist. You see what I'm saying? Because think about it. If I didn't bother to learn about the history, I wouldn't know. The average Nigerian filmmaker doesn't know. They probably think Nigerian film started with, the VHS Nollywood films, but there's more than that. You see what I'm saying? So like that is, I think, it's the failure of the Nigerian system to archive and to store and to educate, to inform. I mean, we do have also some responsibility as filmmakers, but there's only so much you can do without the structure, without the backing of government, without a system that really recognizes the importance of cinema and cultural education. There's only so much you can do. Think about it. If you're a Japanese film student, you have Kurosawa, you have Ozu, you have all these guys to look up to and to find their films. If you're an American, you have Spielberg, you have Scorsese, you have their films to look up to. If you're a Nigerian film student or you want to be a filmmaker in Nigeria, who do you go to? You can't find Hubert Ogunde's films. You can't find Ola Balogun's films. You can't find Adelov's films. You can't find Eddie Uboma's films. What are we doing? We don't archive any of these things. You can't find them anywhere. It just doesn't make sense. Like as a filmmaker, to not have direct references to people who have done it from the same country, in previous years, previous decades. It doesn't make sense that we don't have, this culture. Even the Nollywood films that were made in the 90s, you can't find them anymore. There were the VHS Nollywood films. You can't find them. And it's something, it's sad. It's not like it goes beyond being, like it goes beyond something to be annoyed about. It's just sad. It's just a really sad thing. I think my work speaks for itself. It's in its own lane. And I think when I came out to say that, pretty much from the get-go, I came out saying that. And it was such an abominable thing to say in the minds, in the ears of the core Nollywood practitioners. It still is to a lot of people. It's just that they don't have any power to insult me anymore for it, because what are you going to do, right? It's my opinion. But the thing is that when I said that, even back then, I wasn't saying that to belittle anybody. It wasn't about that at all. It was simply a way of saying that this is a country of 200+ million people. How can our representation of cinema be this one thing? Doesn't make sense. It just never made sense to me, and it still doesn't. So I think Nollywood will continue to thrive. I think Nollywood is the brand that the country needs to attract foreign investment, all of these great things that are happening. We have Netflix. I think Nollywood will continue to be that and will continue to grow because that name means something. I don't particularly like the name for sure, but it's come to stay, right? Because it's a name that came from, some New Yorker journalist, who came here in the 90s. He came to Nigeria in the 90s when we were still making movies for $10,000 and we were shooting for 1 week and having the movie ready in 2 weeks. And he came and he saw how we were churning out these films. I think it was about 2,000 films a year. And he was like, wow, this is like crazy. This is Nollywood. You see the thing. That's how the name came. And it just stuck and we ran with it, which is fine, but it comes from a place. It comes from a specific place, right? And what I found was that when I came into the scene and I had these ideas of the kind of films I wanted to make, as soon as you announce yourself as a Nigerian filmmaker, they put you in that box. And I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. It just was very clear to me it was always very clear to me what I wanted to do from the get-go. And I don't think there's any radical thing to come out and say, look, I'm doing something different, right? And this is great, this is good, this is awesome, but this is what I'm doing. But it sounds so, like, it sounded so radical to say it at the time. This was 2014, you know, it sounded so radical to say it at the time. But I think people are beginning to realize that it's not so radical. You really have to love film to be a filmmaker, at least to really make films that people care about or even care to talk about. You really have to love film, and you really have to be passionate about the craft of it. Not just the filmmaking, the craft of it, like the cinema craft of filmmaking, going back to the 1800s, when it was born in France by the Lumiere brothers, when they put images and pictures together and created the frame rates. You really have to love film that much to understand where it comes from. There's no, oh, we are in Nigeria, we make films for Nigeria. No, film comes from a place. There's history behind it. There's over 150 years of cinema behind that history, and you are just a small part of it. So, like, it never made sense to me why filmmakers don't study film. Like, what are you doing? There's so much to know. It's everything. It's my whole thing. It's representation. It's about perspective. It's about how we see ourselves. Because I think a lot of the problems that we deal with as Africans is first because of how we see ourselves. We don't see ourselves the same way someone from Ireland sees their culture, their Celtic culture, or someone from, Germany, or or from the Slavic lands see their Norse mythology or their Norse culture. We don't see ourselves in the same light. When it comes to, if you're Yoruba, you don't compare yourself along the same vein as someone with the Norse culture or with the Celtic culture. Or if you're Igbo, you don't see yourself in the same vein. So I think that's also one thing that has always rubbed me off the wrong way. And I always believe that cinema, the same way that cinema was used to elevate these cultures and our perceptions of these cultures. Because remember, you can't separate the people from their culture. You can't say, oh, Japan is like the people, but not their culture. You can't have those two elements separate. But for some reason, we've always thought that we could do this. Like we can have Africa or Africans or Nigerians outside of our culture. How? That's the reason why we are so lost. And our cinema is lost as well. Because there's no definition of what Nigerian cinema is, and we're here arguing over terminologies. Another key thing I learned in all of this is like being more, I don't know if it's a lesson, but just being more, I guess, more determined to tell the kind of stories I want to tell. Because in my engagement through Hollywood, at least this very brief engagement, because I wouldn't say I have like one foot in Hollywood, I'm not fully in there, but like through my engagement, I found that there's even more need for my kind of films, more so than ever. So now I have to even be more determined to bring my films into that space, the kind of films I want to make. I can't go there and become another version of what they already have, because then I would just be lost in the crowd. I'll just be like everyone else. The vision for the film came to me in 2016, around March 2016, February, March 2016. And there's a combination of, I guess, elements that made the film take as long as it took. The first would be the fact that it needed to take that long. Obviously, you fight against it. You try to make it happen faster, but the elements were too powerful, and it demanded that it take that long. The second thing was the script in itself, the writing of the script. So I spent the first 2 years working on the script on my own between 2016 to 2018, and I just wasn't going anywhere. In fact, the more I wrote, the more drafts I wrote, the more it seemed I was writing myself further deeper into a corner. And the worst part was I didn't really have anybody to tell me that I was writing crap. In fact, everyone told me what I was writing was great, but I just knew you know, deep within me that this wasn't what I wanted to make. And so this started the next phase of the writing in 2018 when we submitted for the Waga Film Lab in Burkina Faso. And so we were accepted for that lab and we went there. That's myself and my producer. We went there to Waga. And this was where we had the first sort of like open reception to the project. Up until then, we had been fighting to even communicate the idea of a black and white film while we were in Nigeria. But as soon as we landed in Burkina and we started to talk about the project in the workshops, in the labs, you know, with the participants, with the consultants, it was a much different response to what we were getting in Nigeria. And so that kind of sparked, I think, what I would consider to be the first birthing seeds of how I started to have a new look at the project and the story I wanted to tell, which is really about dichotomy and finding the balance between dichotomy. Because in Nigeria, we have the extreme perception of what Mami Wata is and the belief systems that surround tradition and culture and spirituality. Whereas in other climes, especially within West Africa, you have a more balanced view of it that is not necessarily to the extreme. And so that allowed me to start looking at the script in a new light. And yeah, that took a few more years. Those first 10 drafts was between 2016 to 2018. So the draft of the script that I went to Waga Film Lab with was a much different draft from from the next draft that came after I did the labs. After Waga Film Lab, I realized that I shouldn't write any more drafts until I go through this process. So what happened was, after Waga Film Lab, we won, I think we won 2 prizes. I won the LIM prize. It's called the Lake Group West, Less is More. It's a residency. It takes place in 3 countries across Europe. So I won that prize. And my producer, Oge, she won the IAVE Producers Prize. It's another 1-year program for producers where you take your project and you shop it and workshop it across 3 different countries in Europe, right? And it's a network of European producers, and you know, you get to become a part of that network through that process. So what that allowed us to experience was, I guess, new perspectives of the project, like new vistas, new people looking at your project as you talk about it, and they respond to it in a different way. Well, I didn't choose it. It was always, I received it that way. I always received it in black and white. And I have never, even till now, I've tried to picture the film in color. It just doesn't work. It's a different film. It's a completely different film, and not in a good way. So yes, it was just how I received it. Over the years, through the development of the film, I did try to understand why I felt so strongly about this black and white, because I could never explain. Before, I was just stubborn about it. If you ask me, you know, she will tell you. She will tell you, I was just stubborn about it. If they ask me why black and white, I'll be like, that's what I want. And normally that should be a good enough reason. But at some point, I started to really explore as to why I wanted it and I felt so strongly about it. And I realized that it had also a lot to do with my childhood and a kind of sentimentality I had for black and white. You know, I grew up watching every film. All the films I fell in love with, I fell in love watching on the black and white TV. And so the more I had this whole journey of Mami Wata, the writing, the development, which is like an external journey, I cracked the code when I did the internal journey, which is the journey to self. And the journey to self has to do with a whole lot more than just, you know, the structural putting together of script. It has to do with the feeling, the soul, the heart. And yeah, so that I think was, that making that connection was what really made the black and white more, at least on a sentimental level, more meaningful for me. But yeah, it does look pretty cool too. There wouldn't be any creative process without her being in the producer's seat, because I don't produce. I think I do my work in its purest form, in its most, I guess, in its most rarefied form, because I know that she's going to do her work as a producer. So yes, I'm not exaggerating when I say like there wouldn't be any creative work, because just imagine having to write, come up with these concepts, these visions, these images, direct it, and then still have to produce it by myself. I know some people do it. I'm not saying people don't do it, but it's just not how I'm built. And I'm fortunate to have her as a producer. She's really, she's really the best at it. It's tough to ponder because there's really no precedence. You can't say a movie like this, when it was shown in Nigeria, these were the kind of conversations that came. So you can't really say, like, to be honest with you, I'm not expecting anything. Not like I'm not expecting anything in a bad way. I'm just like open to anything. But we've had quite a lot of good feedback based on the few clips we've released, here and there. But whatever people think they've seen in the clips is not the same as when they will sit down, in the four walls of that cinema hall. It's a film that is made for the cinema. It really is. And that's something I'll always be proud of, that we created something in Nigerian film that you can experience in the cinema, the way all these Hollywood movies you pay for because you know that you're paying for cinema experience. That's what you're paying for when you go to watch Mami Wata. It's not just a movie that is projected on the big screen. It really is a movie that is created for the big screen, for the theatrical experience, the sound design, the immersiveness of the film. It feels like, that's what we made it for. So for those of them who are waiting to catch it on Netflix or Prime, don't do that to yourself. Really just go to the cinema and experience it. Because you probably wouldn't have that chance again. Once it's done, cinema runs there's no rerun of cinema runs, like ever, at least as far as Nigeria goes. So this is like really a once in a lifetime opportunity to be like that movie. And I think we can comfortably say that Mami Wata has entered into its own canon of Nigerian films as far as the history of cinema, Nigerian cinema. And so you want to look back 10 years or whatever from now and be like, I watched it in the cinema when it came out. You don't want to be like that guy who, I watched it on Netflix or Prime, and no disrespect to Netflix or Prime. They do what they do, but this is different. This is a cinematic experience. You really want to be that guy who saw it when it came out in the cinema. For the culture, as my man Kenneth Gang would say, for the culture.
Where did they go? See, I don't talk am since. Say this woman when they call Mama Efe, she not get power. They claim say you get power, Abi. Show us! Say if I go Peking, enough fit. Where the Mami Wata power? Where am now? Every month, all of una go carry una goat, una food, una money. Go to give am. When time reach, make you help them. You know fit. See other villages. They don't go far. They get light. They get school. They get tap. They get hospital where we say, if to say we get, that boy no go die. But waiting we get. Mama Efe.